In case you didn't know, I love you. So here's chapter 10. This is my study break, so pardon the spazziness. I kept my head down at dinner. In the women's room, I could be brave because Marley was beside me and she just thought I was nice. But here, sandwiched between people whose hate I could feel radiating off in waves, I was a coward. I looked up from my plate once to see Chris Ambers twirling her fork menacingly, and Ashley, who was so ladylike, had her lips pouted and didn't speak to me. I just wanted to escape to my room. I didn't understand why it was all so important, so the people seemed to like me. So what? They were outranked in here. Their little signs and cheers didn't matter. After everything was said and done, I didn't know whether to feel honored or annoyed. I focused my energies on the food. The last time I had steak was for Christmas a few years ago. I know Mom did her best, but it was nothing like this. So juicy, so tender, so flavorful, I wanted to ask someone else if this wasn't the best steak they'd ever had. If Marley had been nearby, I would have. I took a tentative peek around the room. Marley was chatting quietly with some people around her. How did she manage to do that? Hadn't the same clip declared her one of the immediate favorites? How did she get people to talk to her? Dessert was an assortment of fruits and vanilla ice cream. It was like I'd never eaten before. If this was food, what had I been putting in my mouth up to this point? I thought of May and her equal love for all things sweet. She would have loved this. I bet she would have excelled here. We weren't allowed to leave dinner until everyone had finished, and after that, we were under strict orders to go straight to bed. You'll be meeting Prince Maxon in the morning, and you'll want to look your best, Sylvia instructed. He is someone in this room's future husband, after all. A few girls sighed at the thought. The click and clack of shoes up the stairs was quieter this time around. I couldn't get to wait to get out of mine. Out of the dress, too. I had one set of clothes from home in my backpack and was debating putting them on just to feel like myself for a moment. We dispersed at the top of the stairs, each girl heading off in her own room. Marley pulled me aside. Are you okay? She asked. Yeah, it's just that some of the girls were looking at me funny during dinner. I tried not to come across as whiny. They're just a little nervous because everyone liked you so much, she said, waving off their behavior. But the people liked you too. I saw the signs. Why weren't the girls being mean to you? You haven't spent a whole lot of time with groups of girls, have you? She was smiling slyly, like I should know what was happening. No, just my sisters, mostly, I confess. Homeschooled? Yes. Well, I get tutored with a bunch of other fours back home. All girls. And they each have their way of getting under people's skin. See, it's all about knowing the person, figuring out what will bug them the most. Lots of girls give me backhanded compliments or little remarks, things like that. I know I come across as bubbly, but I'm shy underneath that, and they think they can wear me down with words. I scrunched my forehead. They did that on purpose? For you, someone kind of quiet and mysterious. I am not mysterious, I interrupted. You are a little, and sometimes people don't know whether to interpret silence as confidence or fear. They're looking at you like you're a bug, so maybe you'll feel like you are one. That kind of makes sense. I wondered what I was doing, if I was picking away at others' insecurities somehow. What do you do when you want to get the best of them, She smiled. I ignore it. I know one girl at home who gets so irritated when she can't bother you, she just ends up sulking. So don't worry, she said. All you have to do is not let them know they're getting to you. They're not. I almost believe you, but not quite. She laughed a little, a warm sound that evaporated in the quiet hallway. Can you believe we meet him in the morning? She asked, moving on to the more important things in her eyes. No, actually I can't. Maxon seemed like a ghost haunting the palace, implied but never really there. Well, good luck tomorrow, and I could tell she meant it. Better luck to you, Marley. I'm sure Prince Maxon will be more than pleased to meet you. I squeezed her hand one time. She smiled in a way that was both excited and timid and walked off to her room. When I got to mine, Bariel's door was still open and I heard her muttering something to a maid. She caught sight of me and slammed the door in my face. Thanks for that. My maids were there, of course, waiting to help me wash and undress. My nightgown, a flimsy little green thing, had been laid out for me on the bed. Kindly, none of them had touched my bag. They were efficient but purposeful. They obviously had this end-of-the-day routine down, but they didn't rush through it. I suppose the effect was meant to be soothing, but I was ready to have them gone. I couldn't speed them up as they washed my hands and unlaced my dress and pinned my silver name tag to my silken nightgown. As they did all these things that made me incredibly self-conscious, they asked questions. I tried to answer them without being rude. Yes, I'd finally seen all the other girls. No, they weren't very talkative. Yes, dinner was fantastic. No, I wouldn't meet the prince until tomorrow. Yes, I was very tired. And it would really help me wind down if I could have some time alone. I added to the end of that last answer, hoping they would take the hint. They looked disappointed. I tried to recover. You're all very helpful. I'm just used to spending time alone, and I've been swarmed with people today. But Lady Singer, we're supposed to help you. It's our job, the head girl said. I figured out that she was Anne. Anne seemed to be on top of things. Mary was easygoing, and Lucy, I guess, was just shy. I really do appreciate you all, and I'll definitely want your help getting started tomorrow, but tonight I just need to unwind. If you want to be helpful, some time to myself would be good for me. And if you're all rested, I'm sure it'll make things better in the morning, right? They looked at one another. Well, I suppose so, Anne acquiesced. One of us is supposed to stay here while you sleep in case you need something. Lucy looked nervous, like she was afraid whatever decision you would make. She seemed to have little tremors now and then, which I guess was her shyness coming to the surface. If I need anything, I'll ring the bell. It'll be fine. Besides, I won't be able to rest knowing someone's watching me. They all looked at each other again, still a little skeptical. I knew one way to stop this, but I hated using it. You're supposed to obey my every command, right? They nodded hopefully. Then I command you all to go to bed and come help me in the morning. Please? Anne smiled. I could tell she was starting to get me. Yes, Lady Singer. We'll see you in the morning. They curtsied and quietly left the room. Anne gave me one last look. I suppose I wasn't quite what she had been expecting. She didn't seem too upset about it, though. Once they were gone, I stepped out of my fancy slippers and stretched my toes on the floors. It felt good, natural to be barefoot. I went to unpack my things, which was quick. I kept my change of clothes tucked in the bag and stored in my massive closet. I surveyed the dresses as I did so. There were only a few, enough to get me through a week or so. I assumed this was the same for everyone. Why make a dozen dresses for a girl who might leave the next day? I took the few photos I had of my family and stuck them in the edge of my mirror. It stretched so high and wide I could look at the pictures without having anything interrupt my view of myself. I had a small box of personal trinkets, earrings, ribbons, headbands I loved. They'd probably look incredibly plain here, but they were all so personal I had to have them with me. The few books I'd brought found their way to the helpful shelf near the doors that opened up to my balcony. I peeked out the entry to the balcony and saw the garden. There was a maze of path with fountains and benches. Flowers blossomed everywhere, and each hedge was perfectly trimmed. Past this obviously manicured piece of land was a short, open field and then a massive forest. It stretched back so far I couldn't tell if it was entirely closed in by palace walls. I wondered for a moment why it existed, and then debated the last article from Homa that I held in my hand. My tiny jar, with its rattling penny. I rolled it in my hands a few times, listening to the penny skate around the edges of the glass. Why had I even brought this? To remind myself of something I couldn't have? The tiny thought that this love I'd been building in a quiet, secret place for years was really beyond my reach now made my eyes well up. On top of all the tension and excitement of the day, it was just too much. I didn't know where the jar's permanent place here would be, but for the moment, I set it on the table by my bed. I dimmed the lights, crawled up on top of the luxurious blankets, and stared at my jar. I let myself be sad. I let myself think of him. How had I lost so much in such a short period of time? It would seem like leaving your family, living in some foreign place, and being separated from the person you love should be events that take years to roll into place, not just a day. I wondered what exactly he had wanted to tell me before I left. The only thing I could deduce is that he didn't feel comfortable saying it out loud. Was it about her? I stared at the jar. Maybe he was trying to say he was sorry. I had given him a sound scolding last night, so perhaps that was it. That he'd moved on? Well, I could see that pretty clearly myself, thank you very much. I shut the thought down. I couldn't let that hope build in me. I needed to hate him right now. That anger would keep me going. Staying as far away from him as I could for as long as possible was half my reason for being here. But the hope ached. With the hope came homesickness, wishing May was sneaking into my bed like she sometimes did, and then the fear that the other girls wanted me gone, that they might keep trying to make me feel small, and then nervousness at being presented to the nation on television for as long as I was here, and terror that people might try to kill me just to make a political statement. It all came at me too fast for my dizzy head to compute after such a long day. My vision got blurry and I didn't even register I'd started crying. I couldn't breathe. I was shaking and I jumped and ran into the balcony. I was so panicked it took me a moment to open the latch, but I did. I thought fresh air would be enough, but it wasn't. My breasts were still shallow and cold. There was no freedom in this. The bars of my balcony caged me in. and I could still see the walls around the palace, high with guards atop the points. I needed to be outside the palace, and no one was going to let that happen. Desperation made me feel even weaker. I looked at the forest. I bet I could see anything but greenery from there. I turned and bolted. I was a little unsteady with the tears in my eyes, but I managed to get out the door. I ran down the one hallway I knew, not seeing the art or the drapery or golden trim. I barely noticed the guards. I didn't know my way around the palace, but I knew if I got down the stairs and turned the right way, I'd see the massive glass doors that led to the garden. I just needed the doors. I ran down this grand stairwell, my bare feet making slapping sounds on the marble. There were a few more guards along the way too, but no one stopped me. That is, until I actually found the place I was looking for. Just like earlier, 2 men were stationed at either side of the doors, and when I tried to run for one of them, the other stopped my way, the spear-like staff in his hand bearing me from the exit. "Excuse me, miss, you need to go back to your room," he said with authority. Even though he wasn't speaking loudly, his voice seemed thunderous in the still of the elegant hallway. No, I need outside. The words were tangled. I couldn't breathe right. "Miss, you need to go back to your room now." The second guard was taking steps towards me. "Please," I started gasping. I thought I might faint. "I'm sorry. Lady America, is it?" He found my pen. "You need to go back to your room." I can't breathe," I stammered, falling into the guard's arms if he moved close enough to push me away. His staff fell to the ground. I feebly clawed at him, feeling woozy with the effort. "Let her go." This was a new voice, young but full of authority. My head half-turned, head fell in its direction. There was Prince Maxim. He looked a little odd, thanks to the angle my head was hanging at, but I recognized the hair and the stiff way he stood. "She collapsed, Your Majesty. She wanted to go outside." The first guard looked nervous as he explained. He would be in terrible danger if he damaged me. I was the property of Ayala now. "Open the doors." "But, Your Majesty." "Open the doors and let her go now." "Right away, Your Highness." The first guard went to work pulling out a key. My head stayed in its strange position as I heard the sound of keys clanking against one another and then sliding into the lock. The prince looked at me warily as I tried to stand, and then the sweet smell of fresh air pulsed through me, giving me all the motivation I needed. I pulled myself out of the guard's arms and ran like a drunk into the garden. I was staggering quite a bit, but I didn't care if I looked less than graceful. I just needed to be outside. I let myself feel the warm air on my skin, the grass beneath my toes. Somehow, even things in nature seemed to be bred into something extravagant here. I meant to go all the way to the trees, but my legs only carried me so far. I collapsed in front of a small stone bench and sat there, my fine green nightgown in the dirt and my head resting, my arms on the seat. My body didn't have the energy to sob, so the tears that came were quiet. Still, they took all my focus. How did I get here? How had I let this happen? What would become of me here? Would I ever get back to any piece of the life I'd had before this? I just didn't know, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do about any of it. I was so consumed with my thoughts that I didn't realize I wasn't alone until Prince Maxim spoke. "Are you all right, my dear?" he asked me. "I am not your dear." I looked up to glare at him. There would be no mistaking the disgust in my tone or eyes. What have I done to offend you? Did I not just give you the very thing you asked for? He was genuinely confused by my response. I suppose he expected us to adore him and thank our lucky stars for his existence. I stared down at him without fear, though the effect was probably weakened by my tear-stained cheeks. "Excuse me, dear, are you going to keep crying?" he asked, sounding very put out by the thought. "Don't call me that. I am no more dear to you than the 34 other strangers you have here in your cage." He walked closer, not seemingly at all offended by my loose speech. He just looked thoughtful. It was an interesting expression on his face. His walk was graceful for a boy, and he looked incredibly comfortable as he paced around me. My bravery melted a little in the face of how awkward this was. He was fully dressed in his sharp suit, and I was cowering and half naked, as if his rank didn't threaten me enough. His demeanor did. He must have had plenty of experience dealing with unhappy people. He was exceptionally calm as he answered. "That is an unfair statement. You were all dear to me. It is simply a matter of discovering who shall be the dearest." "Did you just really use the word shall?" He chuckled. "I'm afraid I did. Forgive me. It's a product of my education." "Education," I murmured, rolling my eyes. "Ridiculous." "I'm sorry," he asked. "It's ridiculous," I yelled, regaining some of my courage. "What is?" "This contest. The whole thing. Haven't you ever loved anyone at all? Is this how you want to pick a wife? Are you really so shallow?" I shifted on the ground a little to make things easier for me. He sat on the bench so I wouldn't have to twist. I was too upset to be thankful. I can see how I would appear that way, how this whole thing could seem like it is nothing more than cheap entertainment. But in my world, I am very guarded. I don't meet very many women. The ones I do are daughters of diplomats, and we usually have very little to discuss. And that is when we manage to speak the same language. Maxim seemed to think that was a joke, and he laughed lightly. I wasn't amused. He cleared his throat. Circumstances being what they are, I haven't had the opportunity to fall in love. Have you? Yes, I said matter-of-factly. As soon as the word came out, I wished I could steal it back. That was a private thing, none of his business. Then you have been quite lucky. He sounded jealous. Imagine that. The one thing I could hold over the head of the Prince of Ayala, the very thing I was here to forget. My mother and father were married this way and are quite happy. I hope to find happiness too. To find a woman that all of Ayala can love, someone to be my companion and help entertain the leaders of other nations, someone who will befriend my friends and become my confidant. I'm ready to find my wife. Something in his voice struck me. There wasn't a trace of sarcasm. This thing that seemed little more than a game to show to me was his only chance for happiness. He couldn't try with a second round of girls. Well, maybe he could, but how embarrassing. He was so desperate, so hopeful. I felt my distaste for him lessen, marginally. Do you really feel like this was a cage? His eyes were full of compassion. Yes, I do. My voice came out quiet. I quickly added, Your Majesty. I felt that way more than once myself, but you must admit, it's a very beautiful cage. For you, fill your beautiful cage with 34 other men all fighting over the same thing. See how nice it is then. He raised his eyebrows. Have there really been arguments over me? Don't you all realize I'm the one doing the choosing? Actually, that was unfair. They're fighting over two things. Some fight for you, others fight for the crown. And they all think they've already figured out what to say and do, so your choice will be obvious. Ah yes, the man or the crown. I'm afraid some cannot tell the difference. He shook his head. Good luck there, I said dryly. It was quiet for a moment in the wake of my sarcasm. I looked up at him in the corner of my eye, waiting for him to speak. He gazed at an unfixed point in the grass, concern marking his face. It seemed the thought had been plaguing him. He took a breath and turned back to me. Which do you fight for? Actually, I'm here by mistake. Mistake? Yeah, sort of. Well, it's a long story. And now I'm here. And I'm not fighting. My plan is to enjoy the food until you kick me out. He laughed out loud at that, actually doubling over and slapping his knee. It was a bizarre mix of rigidity and calm. What are you? He asked. I'm sorry? A 2, 3? He wasn't paying attention at all. 5. Ah, yes. Then food probably would be good motivation to stay. He laughed again. I'm sorry, I can't read your pen in the dark. I'm America. Oh, well, that's perfect. Maxim looked off into the night and smiled at nothing in particular. Something in all this was amusing to him. America, my dear. I do hope you find something in this cage worth fighting for. After all this, I can only imagine what it would be like to see you actually try. He came down from the bench to crouch beside me. He was too close. I couldn't think right. Maybe it was a little starstruck or feeling shaky from my crying episode. Either way, I was too shocked to protest when he took my hand. If it would make you happy, I could let the staff know that you prefer the garden. Then you can come out here at night without being manhandled by the guard. I would prefer it if you had one nearby, though. I wanted that. Freedom in any kind sounded heavenly, but he needed to be absolutely sure of my feelings. I don't think I want anything from you. I pulled my fingers from his loose grip. He was a little taken aback, hurt. As you wish. I felt more regret. Just because I didn't like the guy didn't mean I wanted to hurt him. Will you be heading inside soon? Yes, I breathed. Then I'll leave you with your thoughts. There will be a guard near the door waiting for you. Thank you, Your Majesty. I shook my head. How many times had I addressed him wrongly in this conversation? Dear America, will you do me a favor? He took my hand again. He was persistent. I squinted him, not sure of what to say. Maybe. His smile returned. Don't mention this to the others. Technically, I'm not supposed to meet you until tomorrow, and I don't want anyone getting upset, though I wouldn't call you yelling at me anything close to a romantic tryst, would you? It was my turn to smile. Not at all. I took a deep breath. I won't tell. Thank you. He took the hand he was holding and lowered his lips to it. When he pulled away, he gently placed my hand in my lap. Good night. I looked at the warm spot on my hand, stunned for a moment. Then I turned to watch Maxim as he walked away, giving me the privacy I had wanted all day.